Hello everybody, welcome back to my channel and to another video, and in today's video I'm going to show you how I taught Merlin to stand for the hose at Liberty, going from this to this. I'm sure you can agree that that second clip is much nicer to watch and comes as a result of positive reinforcement rather than negative reinforcement. So I've included some footage from hose training sessions from 2020, 2021, and 2022. And before I jump into that footage, I just want to add a quick disclaimer that this video is not intended as a tutorial of sorts. I'm not a professional positive reinforcement trainer, but I do find that watching and hearing about people's processes of how they arrived at a certain behavior with their horse using positive reinforcement to be really helpful. And this is sort of a similar video as the ones I did on how I got Merlin to stop biting and being in my space, and how I got him to side pass at Liberty. But without further ado, I'm going to hand it over to voiceover Caitlin and let her take the reins. Enjoy! So these first clips are from an early hose training session that I did with Merlin a month or two after I bought him. And at this point in my training journey, I had discovered positive reinforcement, but I hadn't implemented it yet. So I was using negative reinforcement, which in this case, the pressure was the hose, and then I was releasing the pressure when he would stop moving, which obviously now is not something that I would do. But I think it's really important for me to show me training him to stand for the hose using both negative and positive reinforcement, so that you can see how much better the end result of the positive reinforcement is. This video also shows my lack of knowledge of trigger stacking at the time, so I'm hosing him and then he hits his legs on this wheelbarrow, which I then moved, but then I didn't really pause to let him reset or really consider stopping the training session there, and I just kept going. And the result was him being more wiggly and walking around a lot more than he had been previously, and at the time I couldn't understand why. And even though I was still being super gentle in my voice, I was continuing to apply an aversive after he had experienced something that had raised his levels of stress. Basically, my method of teaching him to stand for the hose at this time was, as much as I don't like to admit it, flooding. I was applying an aversive to him, which in this case was the pressure of the hose against his body, and holding it there until he exhibited the behavior that I wanted, which in this case was standing for the hose. This was the way that I had been taught to teach a horse how to stand for the hose, and it quote-unquote worked. But as I started to look more into positive reinforcement as a training method, I started to realize that this would be a much easier, much quicker, and much more stress-free way to teach Merlin how to stand for the hose. And I think the results speak for themselves. So I started using positive reinforcement to work on hose training with Merlin while he was on stall rest after his OCD surgery. And these clips are actually from our very first session. And I think it's really important for me to include these because while there were a lot of things that I did right, there were also a lot of things that I did wrong, and you'll see what I mean as I get further through the session. So like I said, the session started out really well. I started out by giving him a lot of time to investigate the hose. I also turned the hose nozzle to the least aversive setting, which in this case is the mist setting. So I'm basically just pointing the hose away from him and letting it run, and rewarding every time that he exhibits any sort of curiosity towards it. So it could be looking towards it, extending his nose towards it, in the beginning even flicking an ear towards it. Here I tried to up the criteria a little bit by pointing the nozzle slightly towards him, and as you can see, he immediately let me know that he wasn't comfortable with that. So as a result of him communicating that with me, I took a couple of steps back and just went back to pointing it away from him and rewarding any time that he exhibited curiosity towards it. And as you can see, it resulted in some pretty cute and funny moments when he gained confidence enough to start trying to drink from the hose and realizing that it wasn't such a scary thing after all. And I just kept doing that for a few minutes. Anytime that he stuck his nose in the mist, I would click and treat. Anytime that he extended his head towards the nozzle of the hose, I would click and treat. And to be fair to my past self, throughout the first half of the session, I did a really good job at continuing to be patient when he was letting me know that he still found the hose pointing towards him to be aversive, like he does here by shifting his weight. And eventually we got to a point where I was spraying the mist closer to him, to a point where some of it would land on him, and he was continuing to exhibit signs of curiosity, no signs of stress, and here you can see me point it towards him and he doesn't really move away, and he continues to show curiosity and that it's like a cool thing that he's enjoying playing with. And then here he exhibited a flame in response as a result of him getting his nose a little too stuck in the water. And this here was the first instance of me pointing the water directly at him and him not moving away, and I was very proud, so he clicked and treated. Also, just popping in a quick freeze frame here, just with a disclaimer that this session lasted in total, I think, about 10 minutes. The video itself is about 8.5 minutes. So the length of the training session wasn't the issue in itself. The issue that I'm going to talk through coming up is that after the instance where he let me point it at his body and didn't react, I upped my criteria and decreased my rate of reinforcement way too quickly, which sort of sent him over the edge, and he started moving a lot more again. Caitlin of 2022 definitely would have stopped the session after the moment where he let me apply the hose to his body for the first time without moving. But you could also say that hindsight is 2020 and that I could only do as well as I knew at the time, and this was definitely a huge improvement from the more intense pressure and release that I was using the year before. So here I'm applying the hose to his body for a more extended period of time, and he's actually being very accepting about it, which you hear me say "good boy" very loudly because I was really happy with this. But here you can see he was very clearly telling me that he was uncomfortable, and I definitely should have backed off here and lowered the criteria again, but I didn't, and as a result he just completely disengaged and loses interest and stops paying attention. And I ended the session shortly hereafter, and I was sort of frustrated because I felt like by being greedy I had lost some of the positive progress that I had made in the first 3/4 of the session. So flash forward to this year, and at this point I had been working with positive reinforcement for about 1.5 years, and my understanding of it and behavior signals and things like that had improved a lot, so I had a lot more tools in my tool belt with which to attack the issue of him being a bit unsure of the hose. So rather than focusing on being able to hose his whole body, I focused solely on his legs and specifically fetlock, because it was mud season and I needed to be able to hose the bottoms of his legs to get them clean to treat for mud fever. And you can see that I still have him attached to a lead rope, but it's super slack, and I'm just being very slow and meticulous about how I use the hose and my rate of reinforcement. I should also note that one of the reasons why he isn't moving in this clip and that he is standing very still is that this was not the first session of the year. I had done a lot of previous work already this year towards getting him desensitized to the hose, but he was still quite unsure of getting his fetlocks done because I had to use a setting on the hose that exerted a lot more pressure in order to get the mud off, so I was still making sure to take my time. When I start out, I don't immediately start hosing off his legs. I still take the time to point it away from him, clicking and rewarding his curiosity of the different noise, because obviously the jet makes a much harsher noise than the mist or the shower settings that I normally use. And as you can see, both when I'm using the hose and when I've stopped using it, he stands pretty darn still. And that comes as a result of previous training sessions where we had literally just worked on rewarding him standing still when I had the hose near him and then eventually on him. And this training is actually a form of what we might call cooperative care, which is essentially a task that you need to be able to perform on your horse for their own well-being, but that you want to still have some form of consent in there. So by slowly making the hose a fun thing for Merlin, I'm making it both a more positive experience for him and making my necessity of being able to hose his feet so that I can treat them for mud fever much easier and less guilt-ridden for me. Because trust me folks, when I say that previous to me using positive reinforcement, trying to get them clean enough in order for me to be able to apply the ointment was not fun for either of us. So last but not least, these final clips are from a more recent session just to show the sort of end result of the positive reinforcement training that I've been doing with the hose. So he's now at a point where he stands completely still at liberty, which makes it much easier for my clumsy self to maneuver the hose and giving him a treat without also having to worry about holding him at the same time. And because he knows as a result of our other positive reinforcement training that when he's at liberty he can leave at any time, I know that he's staying here because he genuinely has grown to enjoy the experience. And I kid you not, he now loves being hosed down, especially on warm days. He he like leans right into it and he gets the lip going in the same way that he does when you find like the proper scratch spot. It's absolutely adorable. So this video has not been intended as a tutorial at all. I am not a professional positive reinforcement trainer. I'm just a very dedicated adult amateur who spends way too much time reading and watching videos about this kind of stuff. And one of the reasons that I wanted to start this YouTube channel was to help promote positive reinforcement and humane science-based horse training as a valid and highly effective form of training that deserves to be recognized just as much as the more traditional forms of training. I truly believe that the more exposure that it gets, the more people will start to consider adopting it as a training method, and each person who gives it a try helps to destigmatize it among the more accepted forms of horse training. I don't know why, but there are a lot of people out there, particularly on TikTok, who like to make fun of people who use rewards-based training with their horses, almost as if having a partner who is equal and willing and fully engaged in the training is bad compared to having a partner who you are dominant over. But that, my friends, is a rant for another time. I'm going to end this video on this adorable footage of Merlin having a drink from the hose to remind you to subscribe if you enjoyed this video, comment down below if you found it helpful, and let me know if there are any other positive reinforcement related videos that you would like to see. And if not, until next time, I hope you're having a wonderful time wherever you are. Have a wonderful day. Bye!